The International Space Station is one of humanity's greatest achievements. But according to Elon Musk, it's also our most expensive comfort zone. He's making the explosive claim that it's time to retire the orbital laboratory and focus all our energy on the real prize, becoming a multi-planet species. But the reasons behind his audacious proposal could change everything we thought we knew about our future in the cosmos. The glorious gilded cage. Before we get into the fireworks, let's be real for a second. The International Space Station is arguably the single most ambitious and complex engineering project humanity has ever accomplished. Period. It's a sprawling, city block-sized laboratory whipping around the Earth at a mind-boggling 17,500 miles per hour, completing a full lap of our planet every 90 minutes. Astronauts who live there see 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets every single day. Yet, behind this spectacle of engineering, a staggering price tag and a ticking clock threaten to bring it all crashing down. Its story began in the 1990s, not just as a science project, but as a masterful piece of diplomacy. The Cold War had just ended, and there was a real risk that Russian rocket scientists, with their immense knowledge, might go to work for rogue states. The ISS project brought these former rivals together. In 1998, the Russian-built Zarya module was launched into orbit. A few weeks later, the American-built Unity node was launched aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour. The moment those two modules were captured and connected by the shuttle's robotic arm was historic. It was the handshake in space that formally ended the space race and kicked off an unprecedented era of cooperation. Since then, the station has grown into a truly global village, with major contributions from Europe, ESA, Japan, JAXA, and Canada, CSA. More than 270 individuals from 21 countries have visited. But it's more than just a symbol. It is a world-class, one-of-a-kind laboratory. Because it exists in a state of perpetual freefall, or microgravity, scientists can conduct experiments that are simply impossible down here. Get this. On Earth, gravity messes everything up. It causes fluids to separate, heavier materials to settle, and delicate structures to collapse under their own weight. In space, you remove that variable. This has allowed scientists on the ISS to do incredible things. They've studied how fire burns in space, discovering a new type of cool flame that could lead to cleaner, more efficient car engines. They've grown perfect protein crystals that, when brought back to Earth, have allowed researchers to map their structures and design new drugs to fight diseases like Parkinson's and muscular dystrophy. And then there's the alpha magnetic spectrometer, a massive particle physics detector bolted to the station's exterior. It's basically a cosmic ray catcher, hunting for the secrets of the universe, things like dark matter and antimatter. It has analyzed over 200 billion cosmic ray events, providing data that challenges our fundamental understanding of physics. You just can't do that from Earth's surface, as our atmosphere blocks most of this cosmic chatter. So, the ISS is a diplomatic marvel and a scientific powerhouse. What's the catch? Well, keeping a wonder of the world in business isn't cheap. The total cost to build and operate the station is estimated to be well over $150 billion. And the annual running cost for NASA alone is a staggering $3 to $4 billion. That's billions of dollars, year after year, just for maintenance, supplies, and transportation. This is where Elon Musk's argument lands. He sees that multi-billion-dollar line item in NASA's budget not as the cost of discovery, but as the mortgage payment on a house we should have already moved out of. In his eyes, the ISS has become a glorious, gilded cage. It's beautiful, it's safe, it's accomplished amazing things. But it's still a cage, tethered to Earth orbit, preventing us from venturing out into the true wilderness of the solar system. To truly understand why Elon Musk is so eager to declare Earth orbit done, you have to understand that for him, this isn't just a business plan. It's a philosophical crusade. He has said many times that his ultimate goal is to ensure the long-term survival of humanity. His logic is simple and terrifying. History shows that every species confined to a single planet eventually goes extinct. Whether it's a killer asteroid like the one that wiped out the dinosaurs, a supervolcano, a man-made nuclear war, or a runaway climate catastrophe, staying on one rock is, in the long run, a losing bet. He talks about the light of consciousness being a rare and precious thing in the universe. As far as we know, we are the only ones carrying it. For Musk, we have a moral obligation to protect that light, to back it up on another hard drive, and that hard drive is Mars. Going to Mars isn't a cool side project. He sees it as the most important work he can possibly do. This is where Starship comes in. Starship isn't just a new rocket. It's a complete paradigm shift in how we think about space travel. The vehicle itself is a behemoth, a stainless steel giant standing nearly 400 feet tall when stacked on its Super Heavy booster. It's designed to be a two-stage system. The Super Heavy, powered by over 30 Raptor engines, does the heavy lifting to get the Starship spacecraft out of Earth's thick atmosphere. Then it separates, flies back to the launch pad, and lands, ready to be refueled and stacked with another ship. The Starship itself continues into orbit. And here's the real game changer: orbital refueling. To get to Mars with a meaningful payload like 100 people and 100 tons of cargo, you need a lot of fuel. The plan is to launch a fleet of tanker starships that will meet up with the main passenger Starship in orbit and top off its tanks. It's like an aircraft carrier refueling its jets mid-air, but on a cosmic scale. Once it's full, the ship has the power to make the 6-month journey to Mars. The key to this whole vision, the secret sauce that makes it all possible, is that one beautiful word: reusability. For the entire history of space travel until SpaceX came along, rockets were single-use. The Apollo program, for all its glory, threw away a Saturn V rocket, the most powerful machine ever built in every single mission. Imagine the cost of a plane ticket if they had to scrap the Boeing 747 after every flight. That's been the insane economics of space for 60 years. By making both the booster and the ship fully and rapidly reusable, Musk believes he can drop the cost of launching a kilogram to orbit by a factor of 100 or even 1,000 R. It transforms space travel from an impossibly expensive national expedition into something more like routine logistics. Now, look back at that $4 billion annual budget for the ISS. In the world of Starship, that's not the operating cost for one old station. That could be the funding for dozens of Starship launches. It's the money you need to build the ships, launch the cargo, and start assembling the first self-sustaining outpost on another world. This is the heart of Musk's gospel. Every dollar and every brilliant engineering hour we spend maintaining the status quo in Leo is a resource not being spent on the most important project in human history. It's an inspiring vision, and it's easy to get swept up in the dream of red deserts and Martian cities. But if you walk down the halls at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, you'll hear a very different, more cautious tune. The veterans of mission control would tell you, not so fast. The argument against abandoning our foothold in LEO is powerful and rooted in decades of hard-won experience. NASA has always followed a careful plan: crawl, walk, run. They don't just shoot rockets into space and hope it all works out. Every step is about learning how to survive and work in a new environment before moving on to something harder. The crawl phase started in the 1960s with the Mercury and Gemini missions. These early missions helped scientists figure out the basics, like whether a human could even stay alive in space. It was all about short trips, testing life support systems, and understanding how the human body reacts to space travel. Then came the walk phase. That's when the Apollo program landed astronauts on the moon. Later, the Space Shuttle and the building of the International Space Station, ISS, taught us how to live and work in space for longer periods. These missions helped train astronauts to do science, fix machines, and handle emergencies while floating in orbit. Now we're entering the run stage with the Artemis program. This is NASA's mission to return to the moon, but this time to stay. They want to build a base there and use it as a training ground for going even farther to Mars. Mars is a huge challenge, and we're not ready yet, but Artemis is the bridge that could get us there. That's why the ISS still matters. It's not just an old space lab floating above Earth. It's the only place where we're learning how humans might survive long trips in deep space. A journey to Mars could take up to 3 years. That means 3 years stuck in a small spacecraft, hit by dangerous cosmic rays with no way to turn back if something goes wrong. We don't know yet what that kind of stress will do to people, but thanks to the ISS, we're starting to figure it out one day at a time. For example, we've learned that long-term microgravity wreaks havoc on the human body. Astronauts can lose up to 1 to 2% of their bone mass for every month they're in space. Their muscles atrophy, their cardiovascular systems weaken, and many experience vision problems called space-associated neuroocular syndrome, SANS, because of fluid shifts in their skulls. The ISS is a laboratory where we are actively testing countermeasures, new exercise regimens, dietary supplements, and medical procedures to solve these problems. Without this data, sending a crew to Mars would be dangerously irresponsible. Then there's the technology. The life support systems on the ISS are the most advanced ever built, capable of recycling over 90% of the water from astronauts' breath, sweat, and urine back into pure drinking water. It sounds gross, but it's absolutely essential for a Mars mission where you can't just send up a resupply ship. These systems are being tested and perfected on the ISS right now. They are the prototypes for the Martian life support of the future. And let's not forget the politics. The ISS is a triumph of international partnership. NASA's current plan for deep space, the Artemis program, is built on that same model. The Artemis Accords have been signed by dozens of nations, all agreeing to a common set of principles for peaceful exploration. This global cooperation spreads the enormous cost and brings the best minds from around the world to the table. Musk's more go-it-alone, company-focused approach, while fast, risks undermining this global framework that has served space exploration so well for a quarter century. What this all boils down to is a fundamental clash of cultures, a tale of two vastly different futures for humanity in space. It's the cowboy versus the curator. On one side, you have the cowboy, Elon Musk and SpaceX. Their philosophy is pure Silicon Valley. Move fast, innovate at a breakneck pace, and don't be afraid to blow things up. In fact, they embrace it. SpaceX doesn't call it a catastrophic failure. They call it a rapid, unscheduled disassembly. It's just part of the iterative design process. Build, fly, fail, learn, repeat. Their tolerance for risk is high because the goal city on Mars is so monumental that it justifies the gamble. It's an engineering-first culture, driven by the belief that the biggest risk of all is moving too slowly. On the other side, you have the curator, NASA, and the traditional space agencies. Their job is not to build a new world, but to be careful curators of scientific knowledge and responsible stewards of public trust and taxpayer money. Their tolerance for risk is, by necessity, extremely low. Every mission is planned with painstaking detail, with layers of reviews and triple redundant safety systems, because human lives are on the line. Mission success is the absolute priority. It's a science-first culture, methodical and deliberate, dedicated to expanding human knowledge one safe step at a time. For decades, these two worlds were separate, but now they are colliding, and the result is a fascinating and sometimes tense symbiosis. NASA, for its part, has been clever. With its commercial crew and cargo programs, it effectively hired cowboys like SpaceX to be its taxi service to the ISS. This has saved the American taxpayer billions of dollars and freed NASA from the business of running rockets to LEO. It allows NASA to do what it does best: be the visionary, setting the grand scientific destinations, while private industry figures out the fastest and cheapest way to get there. The tension between the cowboy and the curator isn't just a conflict, it's the engine of a new era in space. If Elon Musk gets what he wants, and the International Space Station, ISS, is retired, it doesn't mean we're turning our backs on low Earth orbit, LEO. We're not giving up our cosmic backyard. Actually, we're about to see the opposite. Leo is on the edge of something huge, a brand new boom that could change the way we think about space forever. The ISS won't be replaced by another massive, government-owned space station like before. That era is ending. Instead, we're entering a new phase where space becomes a business. This time, it's all about private companies building their own stations and offering space as a service. NASA has already planned for this shift. Through its Commercial LEO Destinations (CLD) program, the space agency is encouraging private companies to take the lead. Their goal is simple: stop owning the space hardware and start renting space on stations the same way you might book a hotel room or a lab on Earth. It's a smart move. Think of it this way: NASA doesn't want to be a landlord anymore. They just want to do science, conduct missions, and train astronauts without the headache of managing an aging station. So instead of building the next ISS themselves, they'll pay private companies to give them the space and tools they need. That way, NASA can focus on more important things, like building bases on the Moon or planning for human missions to Mars. Right now, several companies are in a full-speed race to become the next big players in LEO. Axiom Space is already ahead of the pack. They're building new modules that will be attached to the ISS first. But once the ISS is taken out of service, those modules will break off and become their own flying space station. Axiom wants to do everything from space tourism to scientific research for other countries and even manufacturing products in orbit. Then there's Blue Origin and Sierra Space. These two are teaming up to build something called Orbital Reef. They call it a business park in space. The idea sounds wild, but it's actually pretty practical. Orbital Reef would be a larger, more flexible space station that serves all sorts of customers, researchers, film crews, tourists, and more. It's designed to grow and change with demand, kind of like a shopping mall or co-working space, but floating hundreds of miles above Earth. Voyager, Space, and Airbus are also joining the race. Their project is called Starlab, and it's got a unique twist. Starlab will have a giant inflatable habitat that expands once it reaches orbit. This gives it more space for science without weighing as much during launch. The plan is for it to become a full-on research center, a spiritual follow-up to the ISS's role as a science hub. So how do all these companies afford to build and launch giant floating labs? That's where NASA steps in again. The agency is becoming what they call an anchor tenant. That means NASA promises to use and pay for services on these stations once they're up and running. This commitment gives the companies confidence and something even more valuable: money from investors. If private capital sees that NASA is on board, they're much more likely to put up the billions needed to get these projects off the ground. This new approach does more than just save NASA time and money. It also creates a real market in space. When multiple companies are competing to offer the best space station experience, prices go down, quality goes up, and innovation moves faster. Space becomes more accessible, not just for governments but also for students, researchers, filmmakers, and people with big dreams and big wallets. And the best part? It frees up NASA's budget for the truly hard missions. Maintaining the ISS is expensive. But if that money gets redirected toward the Artemis missions, lunar bases, or Mars expeditions, we all win. NASA won't be stuck managing space real estate. They'll be out exploring, pushing the boundaries of human presence in the solar system. Is Musk right? Does Earth orbit outlived its purpose? Or is it just getting started? Are we giving up control or finally setting space free? Like, subscribe, and decide for yourself.